All right, everyone. So we're going to get started. Thank you all for joining us today. I am Shane. I am here with, well, not here, but with my colleague, Olivia. And today we're going to be talking about social media for scientists. And so before we even get started, I'm going to throw up a poll that I'd like you all to participate in, asking basically, how prepared do you feel currently? Oh, worded this wrong, but how prepared do you feel currently to connect with audiences via social media? One is the least amount, five is the most. So we just want to get a sense of where people are at. So I'll give everyone about a minute to complete this. All right, looks like the voting is starting to level off. Give you all a few more seconds if you haven't voted yet. All right, I'm going to close this. Okay, so all right, well that's a really nice bell curve. So somewhere in the middle, majority of folks or majority of respondents answered about a 3. Okay, that's good to know. All right, so before we even kind of get into the social media aspect, just a little bit about us. If you all have been in one of our webinars before, this is going to be a repeat for you, or if you were part of AGU, I apologize, but not everyone has been on all of our things. So AGU, we're an Earth and Space Society. We're the largest society for that. We have 22, I think, plus journals at this point. We have a bunch of small topical conferences with one big giant one at the end of the year every year, including this year, even though it's going to be completely virtual or almost completely virtual. And within Sharing Science within AGU is the Sharing Science program, and that's what we're part of. And our goal is to help scientists communicate what they do with really anyone. So we provide skills and resources and tools to allow folks to communicate with congressional leaders or other legislators or journalists or really whoever they want to. And even though we're part of AGU, we provide these services for anyone who wants it. So probably folks on this webinar today aren't AGU members or maybe never even heard of AGU before. And we do this through a number of ways. We used to do in-person workshops, and we might do them again some days, but now we're really focusing on webinars, and that's why you're all here, and we thank you for being here. We also have a boatload of online resources. We're very active on our social media, especially our Twitter account. You can go to our website. And we also provide potential opportunities for different types of outreach, and then even kind of, let's call it more one-on-one support. So if you have a question about a specific thing you might be doing, a group you might be reaching out to, we're always happy to chat with folks. This webinar is part of a webinar series called How to Skills for the Complete Scientist. And the idea is that we want to provide folks with a bunch of tools for their toolkit, for their complete scientist toolkit, things they might not necessarily come across in academia or whatever institution they're at. So if you're interested in any of these offerings, you can go to webinars.agu.org. They're all there. You can register in advance, even for the one on December 3rd. So we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. One kind of last thing before we get into it, I just wanted to raise people's attention to this webinar that's happening that SACNIS is putting on with a bunch of different partners, Humanizing STEM, the Art of Storytelling. Storytelling in communication, especially science communication, is so important and so valuable. So if this seems like something you might be interested in, we highly suggest you check it out. Okay, so now putting some faces to the person who's talking to you, the person who will be talking to you. And at the end during Q&A, Olivia and I will pop on our video so you can actually see us. But for now, my name is Shane Hamlin. Olivia and I are both part of the Sharing Science program. I'm an ecologist by training. I studied amphibians and reptiles. I did a little bit of science policy work after I got my PhD because I wanted to know where science went. The policy world wasn't really for me. I really like being kind of this jack of all trades and being involved in a bunch of different things. And so when I found sharing science, even though AGU is not really my scientific discipline, I love the program. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm happy to kind of answer any questions during this webinar. If you have questions, there's a little questions box that you can type them into, and we encourage you to do so, or any questions you might have afterwards if you want to reach out. So that's me, and I'll let Olivia introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so I'm Olivia Ambrogio. I am also a biologist by training, although we didn't plan it this way when we were developing the Sharing Science program. I basically studied the sex lives of marine snails, and then ended up through a rather circuitous route going into the science communication realm and helping AGU develop the Sharing Science program. That's a picture of me taking pictures of horseshoe crabs, who are really cool. And I try to share a lot of sort of drawings and photos of biological life on Instagram.
Thanks, Olivia. Yes, you can see our handles there. We're both on Twitter as just kind of normal folks and also scientists. I'm on TikTok doing SciComm, and Olivia is on Instagram primarily doing art, and you'll see some of her art today as well. So starting out, the first question that we get a lot of times is just why we should use social media. And there's a slew of different reasons for this, but we'll kind of get into it.
Thanks, Shane. Yeah, so there are a lot of great reasons to use social media for science communication in particular. And you'll see just a non-comprehensive list here on the screen. And the great thing about using social media is that it can help you achieve any of those goals. And another really great thing about social media is that it makes use of all of these hashtags. I'm thinking in particular, although they're across many different platforms, but Twitter and then Instagram. Twitter in particular, hashtags allow you not only to search by topic through these hashtags, but it also can help you find community. So both for people within science communication who maybe aren't finding other people at their institutions who value it the same way, or people who are part of one of the many underrepresented groups in STEM, to find a wider community in part through these hashtags on social media can be really valuable for everybody. And it can help amplify the voices of those who are communicating about these topics. Along those lines, representation is really valuable, and using social media not just to humanize science, but also to show the diversity of people doing science and all that we still need to do to really support an inclusive community is another really valuable part of using social media, and that social media really lends itself to. An example of this is with the Black in the Ivory hashtag that came out 2 weeks ago, a week and a half. Time has sort of become elastic for me right now. With a number of people across disciplines who are Black in academia sharing the really sometimes horrible challenges that they've had in an inherently racist system. And you can see, like, this was just a minute screen grab, I think, that Shane got. Just a ton of stuff out there. So not only did this hashtag allow people to come together and give sort of a framing for people to share, but it allowed people to find each other. It allowed this whole these voices to be amplified in a way that they probably would not be were it not for social media. And then finally, of course, why use social media for science communication? Well, right now, what else are you going to use? Not to be too simplistic about it, but we are really in a time where it's very difficult to do any sort of wide-ranging in-person or face-to-face outreach. And so why not use social media to the best of your abilities, as we do at AGU, and we'll show this slide of our various AGU handles in a bit as well at the end. But this is a great time to either get started or improve whatever kind of social media communication you're doing, because everybody's on it. Another good reason from a career perspective to use social media for science communication is that there's a lot of research coming out now showing that scientists who have their research shared on Twitter, who are active on Twitter, have more citations. So there's a very large science Twitter community, and people are following each other, and people are noticing the research of others whom they might not have come across in a literature search or at a conference. So your presence even on social media is being noticed by your colleagues. A really interesting paper that just came out this June looked at just the effect, because you could say, well, the people who are tweeting or the work that's being tweeted is already more exciting, and so that's why it's getting more citations. No, they did a randomized trial of papers that they tweeted about and those that they didn't, and they saw a real difference in the number of citations. So even if you're just thinking about this more from a how can this help me professionally perspective, it really can. And again, as you think about your goal or goals related to science communication generally, one, you should think about this in any circumstance as you approach what you're doing, but also social media can let you do a lot of these things. And we're going to talk more as we go through this webinar about which platforms might be best for you in achieving different goals or what other factors you want to consider. So just as a little reiteration of the take homes here, why use social media? Well, for one, here we are in a global pandemic. We're connecting online anyway. This is a great time to really invest in it. It allows for so many different goals because there are so many different platforms and audiences on social media, so you can really achieve a lot of different outreach successes. And again, you can get your work noticed both by scientists in your field and by journalists who use Twitter very regularly when they're looking for news articles. This is a great way to find and build community, whether you're looking for more mycologists and you don't have many at your institution, or whether you're looking for a group that you're a part of that is simply not represented at your institution. And again, this really has a powerful effect on amplifying the voices of those who have not been allowed to be heard as much in science as they should have. Okay, so now we've convinced you that if you haven't already been using social media for science communication, you should. And Shane will let you know a little bit more about the social media landscape and how it differs from in-person outreach.
Thanks, Olivia. All right. So with social media, well, actually with any sort of communication, it's so important to know your audience. And if you were at our last webinar, we covered this in depth, but we're just going to touch on it here. Choosing the right audience is important. And part of that, at least with social media, is knowing who's on what platform. This is not really how it works. Facebook, we're going to talk about who's on what a little bit later, but Facebook is primarily for family members, for friends from home, that type of thing. And so if you're really trying to reach a younger demographic, Facebook might not be the way to do that. So knowing that before you even start doing social media can help save you a lot of time and energy that might be wasted otherwise. And usually when thinking about your audience, you can kind of pinpoint who you're going to be talking to. If you go to a science center, or if you go to a congressional member's office, or if you're meeting with a journalist, you can craft your message for that audience because you know who that audience is going to be ahead of time. That's not necessarily the case for social media. It really is anyone who's following you or anyone who might come across your tweet or your post or whatever it might be. And that might sound really daunting, like how can I connect with all of these people? But it's also an opportunity to think about what you're saying and think about, okay, maybe I can't filter out so and so, but I really still want to connect with this audience. So I'm going to try and get my message that's really going out to a broad audience to really resonate with a specific audience or two. Or maybe you do want to have a really broad audience that tries to connect with many people as possible. And social media is really great for that. So things to think about. Olivia touched on this already, but one, what are your goals? What do you want to get out of this? Why are you on a specific platform? Why do you want to talk about your science? But on the flip side, think about what your audience might want. And again, social media is kind of difficult because there's so many different audiences, but treat that as a good thing. Okay, maybe they're just interested in what I want to do. Maybe they have a bunch of different goals. I'll try to touch on as many as I can, but not be discouraged if you can't hit all of them. And think about who they are. Who are the folks that are probably following you? Like I know for me personally, especially on something like Twitter, it's mainly scientists or science communicators. And so I can tailor my messaging to them with that in mind. And you can even think about the audience's values and their interests and their concerns. I said that you can't really tailor who your audience is on social media, and that's true, but not like it's not. I wanted to be despondent about that because there is a smidge that you can do. So, for example, I'm on a bunch of different social media platforms. On Twitter and very recently on TikTok, my account is just open. Anyone who wants to follow me, wants to read my tweets or see my videos or whatever it might be, they can do that. And I'm aware of that. So I put things out there that I am fine with the world at large knowing about me. So mainly it's, especially on Twitter, it's science. TikTok's my dog, and that's mostly it, with a little bit of breweries and cycling stuff mixed in there. I'm on Instagram as well, but my profile is closed. So you have to follow me and I have to approve you in order to see on Instagram. Again, Instagram is mostly my dog, but still, I like having a little bit more control of who can actually see these posts. And then when it comes to Facebook, if you're not a friend of a friend, I do not exist. And it's not because I'm putting like anything extraordinary or anything that I would be ashamed of showing other people or anything like that. I just like that it's mainly close friends and family, and I like having that control. So there is some way to do a smidge of tailoring, so it's not all a lost cause. And social media is different. Like I said, it's broader. There's so many different channels out there and so many different mediums out there. So, for example, like I said, I'm a herpetologist by training. I used and still occasionally do field work. And so if I was going to a fifth grade classroom, I could prepare for the questions they might ask me. Versus if I was going to a chamber of commerce, they might ask me very different questions. It might be like questions about why are salamanders gooey versus how much money is this project going to cost if we have to save all the turtles before we build there. Those are very different, but I can prepare for that. Social media has all of those questions and everything in between. Questions on identification, questions on are snakes poisonous, because they're probably actually venomous. Very specific questions that I would swear were coming from my dissertation committee, or just things like, hey, look at this really neat thing. That's great. I actually really love that about social media because I can answer the types of questions that I want to answer and largely ignore the ones I don't. So instead of it being overwhelming, I actually view this as a positive. Also, when thinking about your message and thinking about who your audience is, it's really important to frame your message and think about why your message should matter to this host. So this video over here that you're seeing is a TikTok of me and my dog, and basically it's a video representation of what you see here. So you want to engage your audience in a way that they care about and not literally scare them away. You could go, we can't play sound through the platform, unfortunately, but you can go and see this. And it's me being very excited about this disease ecology course I'm teaching. And my dog Tacoma does not care. Like, he is not this audience. And I literally scare him out of the house talking science. No one wants that. So really think about why your message would matter to the group you're trying to engage with. We did a whole webinar on general science communication, thinking about your audience and jargon and messaging. We have links to that. We'll throw in some follow-up stuff. But if you don't want to watch an entire archived webinar for an hour, we took, Olivia drew these cartoons and we animated it and did voiceover. It's about an 8-minute section. So we have this entire webinar distilled down into 8 minutes that we'll pass along. It's on our YouTube channel as well. So if you're more interested in just general SciComm stuff, it's there and you can take a look at it. So just really to wrap up, think about who your audience is. On social media, it could be anyone, and that's might be a scary thing, but that also could be a really great opportunity to engage with audiences who you might have never thought about before and you never thought that you'd be able to engage with. Some platforms do let you tailor who that audience is. Twitter's kind of difficult to do that. You can block folks and you can make your Twitter private, but Instagram's really good for this. Facebook's really good for it. There are platforms out there that allow you to tailor it, and then your message can be a little bit different depending on what platform you're on. Also, consider your goals and your audience's goals, and like who they are, what they're interested in, what they're concerned in, what their values are. All of these things are going to help you frame your message to your audience in a way that they not only understand, but they also care about. All right, so now that you've thought about your audience, it's time to think about what outlet you're choosing. And before we get into this, I'm interested in what outlets everyone is on. So I'm going to throw up another poll. You could pick multiple ones for this, but tell us what platforms you're on. You're only given 5 here because we're only allowed to do 5. So that's why I know there's much more than this. But yeah, I'll give you all, again, about a minute to answer, and we'll go from there. All right, I'll give folks a few more seconds to get those final votes in. All right, I'm going to close this, and then let's see. Okay, so Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Yeah, that's actually exactly kind of what we would expect. TikTok and especially Twitch are more emerging platforms. One I didn't put on here is Snapchat. I would imagine it's somewhere kind of in between these. But we at AGU, and especially in Sharing Science, are primarily on Twitter. AGU has Twitter, Facebook, and our Instagram accounts really, really popular as well. But we are starting to get into the TikTok world. HU has one, I personally have one, and I am just fascinated by Twitch. So folks out there who are on Twitch, I would love to talk to you. But with that, we'll talk about choosing the right outlets, and I will hand it over to Olivia to talk about that.
Thanks, Shane. So as you think about what kind of platforms you might want to use, and again, you are probably already on some, and maybe those are the ones that you are already using for science communication, or maybe you're thinking about specifically using a particular platform or outlet for science communication. But you really want to think about things like what is your mission? Shane was talking about figuring out your goals. What are you trying to get out of this? What do you personally have to say? So is there a lot of original content that you want to share? Are you trying to curate things that you think already exist but have not been brought together? Or are you trying to really solicit information or profiles or what have you from others and bring it together? And part of this could be things like if you want to achieve if you're trying to make a lot of calls to action of people, what outlet are you using? Does it allow you to share a lot of links very easily? Or is it something where that's a little more challenging? Even simple things like that can help you determine what kind of outlet you want to look at. And then think about what you want your voice to be, both in terms of whom you're talking to and what kind of voice or tone you think they'll be drawn to, and also how are you talking about it? So I already saw we have a question around if you have an institutional Facebook or Twitter or other social media account, how can you maintain the professionality of that representing this institution, but also either be a little playful or a little conversational or whatever you think is going to really attract and interest the audience that you have. Certainly for Sharing Science, our Twitter account, it's mainly Shane. I jump in sometimes. And, we're still representing AGU, but we also try to have a more conversational voice because that's just who we are. Similarly, the Monterey Bay Aquarium, you may or may not be familiar with their accounts, especially on Twitter, is hilarious and has horrible marine puns. And they've achieved this wild popularity through really developing a unique voice. And then, of course, how much time do you have to invest in whatever outlet you're involving yourself in? So this little list that we've made, I want to start by making clear that the time investment we've listed is the minimum. It is certainly possible and often recommended to spend a lot more time than this. But that said, you could spend just a few minutes every day on Twitter, on Facebook, posting something, liking someone else's thing, retweeting or sharing something that someone else has posted. Same with Instagram. Um, Although with Instagram, as with TikTok, if you're developing the content, say doing drawings or planning a whole photo shoot, the additional time to create the product you're sharing has to be taken into account as well. And then of course, this W here is for WordPress or other blogging sites. That's going to be a major time investment if you're creating your own blog, because you want to be able to have a sufficiency of good content. Now, that said, there are scheduling software out there. There's TweetDeck, which is free, that's for Twitter, and there's Hootsuite. I think there's a free version as well as a pro version, but that is for many different platforms. And what you can do with those is if you only really have like 1 hour in the week that you feel you can dedicate to this, you can spend that hour scheduling posts that you're going to share throughout the week. And that allows you to maintain a presence online, even if you can't sort of be there immediately in the moment throughout an entire week or month or what have you. And then also think about what's the reach that you want to have and who's the audience you're trying to connect with. And I mentioned that there's a paper looking at scientists and academics really on Twitter. And I'm going to just move on to the next figure, which is saying a similar thing. Basically, what these researchers found is that up to a certain threshold of followers, I think it was about 1,000, scientists are mostly communicating with other scientists and with others who are associated with conservation or research, within that general group. And then it's once you extend past that threshold number of followers that your following is not only larger, but much more diverse. Now, that said, I myself have a little quibble with the term preaching to the choir, because as we know, not all scientists even know about each other's science, much less think alike on any number of topics that you may be communicating about. So I think there's still a lot of value in considering that a kind of outreach as well as depending on what career stage people are at is going to really affect how much this is novel information for them. But just something to think about, that if you're really aiming for what we call the general public, although that's kind of a non-existent monolith, you're going to need to aim for having a larger number of followers in order to achieve that, by and large. And then you also want to think about the demographics of different outlets and platforms. So generally, Instagram, Tumblr, Snapchat, TikTok skew younger. Facebook, for example, tends to skew older. Twitter and blogging sites have a huge science presence. So while that's really great in some ways, it's also worth being aware of that you're mainly going to be, initially at least, communicating with scientists. And then there can also be gender dynamics. So Pinterest tends to be more female by and large. Reddit tends to be more male. Now, that said, if there's a platform, an outlet that especially speaks to you, that's what you should focus on, because you'll be able to find some, at least, of the people you're trying to reach on any of these platforms, because this is not universal. And then the last thing you really want to think about too is what sort of medium or media are you going to be sharing when you do your science communication, and which platforms lend themselves most to that, both in terms of which ones do you feel are easiest to use to share your videos or your images, and which have the resolution that you're happy with, and also which ones are going to attract the audience you're looking for. So certain sites like YouTube, for example, for video, or Instagram for photos, or SoundCloud for audio, that's what people are coming for, right? They're coming to YouTube for videos. They're coming to Instagram for photos. They'll probably read captions, but they're coming to look at visuals. SoundCloud, they're coming for audio. So if that's really how you're presenting your content, you might want to tailor to those environments. And then two, if your ideal plan for social media is also to network with others in your general field, LinkedIn, Twitter, and ResearchGate are great platforms for that. And you don't have to jump into all the things or even one outlet sort of all at once. There are lots of these Twitter, what are called Roker accounts that will let you take over their account, including our AGU Sharing Science account, that will let you take it over for either a day or up to a week to sort of share your information about science. We have these blogs, the Plain Spoken Scientist that talks about SciComm, the Bridge that talks about science policy, that you can do a guest post for, so you don't have to create your own blog. You can take over our our Instagram account to share photos and stories about your research life. And then this is not an AGU thing, but Skype a Scientist allows scientists to do video sort of meetings or conversations with classes or families or even just members of the public these days, where they can ask you questions. And you can do that regularly, but you only have to commit to doing it once. So that's another way to try out new ways of online interaction without having to sort of dedicate yourself to it or commit to one kind of platform. So again, as you think about these outlets, what is your mission? And how are you going to achieve it? And what are you trying to get people to do through following your posts? And are you going to have calls to action or links you want them to follow? What kind of voice do you want to use, and how conversational is it? And are certain platforms going to lend themselves to that, to playfulness or to seriousness or to infographics more than others? What kind of time commitment can you make? And bear in mind that scheduling software can assist you with this, but that you really will need to engage a little bit of time to make sure that you're really interacting with people. What kind of audience do you want, and what sort of desired reach number of followers are you going to need to aim for in order to achieve the outreach that you're really hoping for? And then what medium or media are you most comfortable with using, and which platforms are going to make you feel good about sharing that? So once you've thought about all of this and you've gone into using an outlet or more than one, how do you evaluate success? And Shane will tell you about that.
Right. Okay. So there's a number of different ways to define success. And before I even start this, I'm just going to say that it's kind of up to you. That's going to be the take home of this. One easy way, and probably the most common way, is to just think about the number of followers you have. This is especially true on things like Twitter or Instagram or TikTok. So for something like our main account, our HEU account, we have 65,000 followers. The HEU account's been around for a while, over 10 years now. And also HEU is a giant Earth and Space Science Society. So it makes sense that that's the type of number that they want. Our Sharing Science account has been around for a few years now, and we have 5,500 followers, and we're pretty proud of that. There's been a lot of work that's gone in to really up that number. And it's not like just about the numbers, I want to say, but numbers is usually that easiest metric. My personal account, I have a little over 2,100 followers, and I remember I've been on Twitter longer than the Sharing Science account has been on, and I remember the day that the Sharing Science account surpassed my own Twitter account, because I do a lot more tweeting for Sharing Science, and I was kind of sad at that, honestly. I've gotten over that, frankly, because they have kind of have shared purposes. I just want to get science communication out there, and I want to communicate to folks, and I want to show people how awesome science is. So I'm fine with it now, but it's just something that, like, the fact that there's less followers there, that's okay. It's just one type of success. Another type is impressions. So these are retweets, likes, comments. So we're scrolling through on the side here, and you can see I'm going to stop on this tweet. It has a handful of retweets, a half dozen likes. But you can click this little button on the side on Twitter, and it gives you analytics, and it tells you impressions, engagements, media engagements, likes and clicks, and all slew of different things. So each tweet can give you really more fine scale detail on how far you're getting. So even though it only has a handful of retweets and a handful of likes, it actually gets a lot of impressions. So these are eyes on your tweets. So maybe digging into these analytics is a little bit better of a way to figure out what type of impact you might be making. And then engagement. And so I have this cartoon up here because I like this. This is for general communication, but there's this idea out there called the deficit model that people just need information. They have a deficit of information to understand something or to agree with something or to latch on to something. And that's not true at all. It's not because people lack information. It's because they lack a relationship with that person or they've lacked engagement with a person trying to give that message. And so something that's really important to think about with social media, and frankly, something that we could do better about is engagement. These are actually interactions, two-way interactions, multiple-way interactions with folks through social media, whether it's replying back and forth, whether it's collaborating on different projects. I personally know scientists who have met people through Twitter and collaborated on research projects and gotten manuscripts published without ever actually meeting people. So if you can and you do have the time to actually engage with people, actually have discussions with them and conversations with them, that's probably the most substantial type of success. But again, it comes in all sorts of different forms. Followers, that's the easiest. That's probably one of the most universal one, and it's going to be different for everyone. It's 65,000 for the main account. It's 5,500 for the sharing science account. That's fine. Engagement and impressions. This is really easy to find on Twitter analytics and gets a little bit more fine-tuned than just retweets and likes. And again, back and forth. If you can establish a dialogue, do it. If you don't have the time for it, don't have the bandwidth, that's fine. There are other ways to define success. But that back and forth engagement is really kind of the pinnacle of what social media and just all kind of communication should be about. Now, we've been talking about social media, we've been talking about all the great things about social media and all the positive, but there are some drawbacks, and Olivia is going to talk about trolls.
Thanks, Shane. Whoops, except I'm going to try to go backwards as I talk about them. So first, let me be clear, in spite of my drawing, we're not talking about the ones that live under bridges. Those would probably be easier to deal with, really. By trolls, we're referring to people who have particular sort of ideological hangups, let's say, or convictions, or a lot of anger, who may attack people on social media if they're posting about topics that they perceive as controversial. So especially things like climate science, evolution, vaccines come to mind. And they may attack around the science and put out a lot of sort of straw man arguments and others inaccurate information, or they may attack the person themselves who's putting out accurate scientific information. And I will say, well, let me start with this and then I'll go back for a second. So I'm not going to recommend one way or the other about whether you should engage or not, but you should make a decision for yourself in advance, just so that you're prepared in case you encounter anyone who is a troll or more than one. And if you do engage, remember that your real audience is everyone else who's following this mainly public conversation. So even if the troll is very snarky, if you get really snarky and insulting in turn, you're going to turn off the other people who are the real ones that you're getting your message to. And even if you've been engaging for a while, if this is taking a toll on you, most platforms will let you mute or block people who are trying to bother you. And so really consider that, because your health is what's most important. But I do also want to say that, especially unless you reach a very large number of followers, you're not all that likely. There are always exceptions, but you're not all that likely to encounter trolls. I think people worry a lot more about this than they actually have to encounter it. So just keep that in mind as well. And with that, we're going to talk a little bit more about what you can do with all of this information and how we hope that you'll continue engaging with AGU.
All right, so first, before we do that, one final poll, if you all will entertain me. But we set this out at the beginning to see how you're prepared, and just kind of interested to see if anything's maybe shifted, maybe just a point, hopefully in the positive. Give you all, again, probably a minute to go through this. All right, so we're starting to plateau. I'll give y'all a few more seconds. All right, let's see. Oh, yeah, there's a little bit of a shift from mostly being in that 3 to that 4. Well, that's great. And again, I understand we've been here for, my time says 42 minutes. So it's hard to do anything substantial in 42 minutes, but hopefully there's some really good stuff in here that helps y'all. But there's always more. So just some reminders. There's this webinar on storytelling. Storytelling is great in person, on social media, just in conversation. So please check that out. We're really excited to be a partner for this. I think it's going to be really fantastic. Again, we have a whole series that we've created. So if any or all of these interest you, please go to webinars.aju.org and think about registering. We do a whole bunch of stuff. It's not just social media. We have resources on communication and outreach, our science policy shop, our experts on the legislative process and what it means to do science policy and communicate to legislators. We have a really strong press office who does press releases, and you can be an expert for things like natural hazards if they get press inquiries. And we have these blogs, the Plainspoken Scientist and the Bridge. If you're interested in contributing a guest post, we'll have information in a follow-up email on how you can do that. We love guest posts. We threw up this slide in the beginning. I've noticed some of you have been following the Sharing Science account and our accounts personally, but if you are on social media and you want to follow us on social media, you can do so for the Sharing Science account, the Science Policy account, and then our personal accounts, and then even our general AGU accounts. There's great information out there in all of these things. This is a little bit of a side, but if you're interested in science communication and you're interested in hearing from scientists who do really fun things and you want to hear their stories behind kind of their manuscripts and their lectures, we have a podcast called Third Pod from the Sun. If you're interested in that, please check it out. And then finally, this is one webinar in a series of webinars, but even then, we don't want our relationship with y'all to end there. We actually want to have a relationship. So if you're interested in this type of stuff and you want to be part of a community, largely online community, that has all sorts of resources, discussions, topics, different types of cool toolkits, a whole library of science communication manuscripts, consider joining the Sharing Science community. It's free. It'll take you 5 minutes to fill out the form, and you'll get access to all of this stuff, much of which, sure, is available more broadly to everyone, but not all of it is, especially the manuscript library. So take 5 minutes, join the community. We'd love to see you there. And with that, I think we're going to open it up to questions. I will throw my webcam on so you can see actually. Hi everyone, this is what I look like. Olivia as well. But yeah, let's open it up to questions.
Yeah, and we have a really good number, so thank you everyone for asking, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. So starting, all right. Oh, this is a good one. So being effective on social media also requires some form of preparation, from creating a blurb or making a nice visualization editing, especially if the audience is different from our usual academic audience, and that takes a lot of time. How do we convince PIs and even funding agencies that being active on social media is also important and deserves real estate in our schedules? Great question. Shane, do you want to address that a little?
Yeah, I'll start. So I think there's like the common good argument, and then there's the selfish argument. And I don't mean selfish in a bad way, but the common good is just why we do communication in general. Like it's our responsibility as scientists to get the word out there into the broader public so that policy decisions can be made, so that people don't disagree with certain principles. But I understand that argument doesn't appeal to everyone, and that's fine. The citations work that Olivia showed is really important. There is more and more and more research coming out that shows that people who are active on social media get cited more, and citations and people recognizing your work is what you want. So that's it right there. People are establishing connections and making collaborations and doing science because of social media. And so the more collaboration that happens, that's the name of the game now. I mean, it should have always been, right? But especially now, so much interdisciplinary science, those connections are happening via social media. And it's becoming one of these things you can't, you almost can't not. I know the double negative is kind of silly, but it's honestly becoming a part of some funding now. It's becoming a really integrated part of outreach and science communication aspects of proposals, and that's becoming an integral part. So even if I'm not saying, I want to back up and say not everyone has to be on social media, not everyone has to be on all of the social media, but a lot of people want to, and it's becoming more and more difficult not to be in some way, shape, or form. So I'd say really stick to, especially if you need numbers, those citations and collaborations, because like that's the science behind it.
Yeah, I agree. If you can try to frame it as it having a lot of the same benefits as going to conferences with a lot less of the cost, that's a great way. Also, again, journalists are really using social media, especially Twitter, to find good science that they're then sharing more widely. Um, okay, do you have any tips to increase your followers on both Twitter and Instagram? Good question. One thing that I'd say related to it is, well, two things really. One is you really do have to be present on these platforms. Again, we talked about like the amount of time you want to expend at absolute minimum. But if you really want to increase the following, you need to be on there much more regularly, and you need to be actually doing that social part of social media, which is the engagement, the replying, the retweeting other people's content, the back and forth with people. And then two, I'd say pick SciCommers you like, whether they're institutions or individuals on Twitter and Instagram, and see what they're doing, and then try to do some of the same.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would say is a quick, I don't necessarily know if this will increase your followers per se, but it will increase views on your tweets, which probably will lead to more followers. But when you're tweeting things, always include some sort of an image with it. This is a small thing, but it makes a ton of difference because people will respond more to tweets with, I'm saying specifically on Twitter, but they'll respond more to tweets with images than tweets without. We've done this with manuscripts that we've put out, and we literally take a screen grab of the title, and the tweets with the screen grab get more clicks than ones without the screen grab. So just even small things to think about when you're going about just tweeting or scheduling tweets or whatever it might be.
I'm interested in experimenting with Facebook Live. Any suggestions or advice? Shane, I know you've participated in some of these.
Yeah, so I mean, just the experiment part's the best thing to say. I don't have any specific um, like do's or don'ts. I would say because it is live, be aware of like if you can maybe have a script, right? Do as much advanced prep as possible because it is live, because things can happen, things like technology issues or whatever it might be. So do as much prep in advance. And on the flip side, like if something goes wrong, it's fine, right? We're doing these webinars and things are going really well, but things haven't always gone well. We've had tech issues, we've had different things happen, and you kind of just got to roll with it. So even though there's no redo, it's fine. It's just great that you're out there trying it.
Yeah. One very quick one to respond to, how does someone typically go about asking permission from the various account administrators to take it over? So typically, any of those Roker accounts that we've listed, they will list a contact, or you'll see tweets that will say, contact us here, fill out this form to ask to participate. So that's really a good way to do it. And then for our own accounts, in the follow-up email, we'll be letting you know more about that.
Yeah, we have a form as well. So
Yeah. Another question, what are your thoughts and suggestions about YouTube channels, podcasts, and linking them to other social media accounts? Shane, do you want to take this one?
yes. I'm less familiar with YouTube. We have a YouTube account, but it's mainly our recording of webinars. But I know a lot of people are on YouTube for science, and the actual AGU account has a very robust YouTube account. It's really great. I'm intimately familiar with podcasting. I am one of the co-hosts of our podcast. I'm also part of a science storytelling organization called the Story Collider, who has a podcast. I've done a bunch of it, and not just for say YouTube or podcasting, but if you're on a bunch of different types of services with different types of media, link them all over the place. When I do TikToks, I share them on Twitter. When we do podcast episodes, we share them on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Share all around. Just because you're on one platform doing one thing, because that's the best way to put it out there, doesn't mean it has to only live on it. So share widely, share across multiple platforms. There's no, like, don't feel bad about oversharing, especially on Twitter, because it's a snapshot in time. People are not going to think, oh, this is ridiculous. Like, share as much as you can across as many different platforms as you can.
Yeah. We have a question here, and again, Shane, maybe you have more information than me on it. I can find my analytics on Twitter, but how do I benchmark that? Are there free ways to get the same data about other accounts that you follow and see how you stack up? So you're saying sort of a comparison. I see.
Yeah, that I actually do not know. But we probably know people who do. So I'll make a note of that. And then, yeah, in these we'll have a general follow-up email in the coming days or maybe early next week. And we'll try to answer that for the entire group.
And let's see. So a question about having Twitter and Facebook pages for an organization and you're communicating science through them. Any advice? Shane, I'm going to let you take this one too, since you are most of Sharing Science Twitter.
Yeah, it depends on the institution. So first things first is figure out who are the powers that be, who can tell you like how formal or flippant or probably somewhere in between you can be. When we created the Sharing Science account, we went through a very formal process. We went to our superiors with a proposal and all of this, and we got it. But honestly, we don't we really have free reign to do mostly what we want, and that's not because like AGU just doesn't care. They care deeply, right? We are a very serious scientific society, but they also understand what we're doing. They know our voice because we were very clear with them. They know what we're sharing. They know kind of our goal for the account. So I would say if you have an account and you want to take it over, or if you don't have an account and you want to start one in your institution, have everything prepared ahead of time. Know what your goal is, know what the voice is going to be. Take all of these things we've said in this webinar into consideration as if you're doing your own account, and make sure they're even clearer if you want to do this for an institutional account, because the less questions the folks who can make these approvals have, the better.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, can you say a few words about hashtags? How much is too much? Invent your own or not? Depends on purpose, and different number of hashtags are going to be better or worse depending on what platform you're on. So for Instagram, I've heard, and this may be a rule that is no longer true, but that you should aim for something like at least 12 hashtags for whatever you're posting, just because that's going to get more people who are following based on existing hashtags of various descriptions related to your visuals. With Twitter, of course, you don't want to have nearly as many because it's going to take up all of your characters. As for whether to invent your own or not, if you're planning to create a new campaign, or something that you're trying to get people to buy into and you feel that you can get people to jump on and share by using this new hashtag, then sure. If you're trying to just increase your own reach and following and amplify your message, use the ones that already exist, because we know that those are what people are actually looking at and using.
Yeah, I don't have anything significant to add. I did see one though, and I can answer this very quickly because this is my mess up. There was a question about the July 9th workshop, because we have the whole list. it is July 16th. It is not July 9th. We will fix that in the advertisement because I will not be in the office that week, so that would not be good. But thank you for that catch. It is July 16th. It should be correct on the actual registration page.
Let's see. Okay. We'll maybe do a couple more questions, and then I hope that we can try to answer some more of these in the follow-up email that we send to everybody who attended. One that I've noticed is, someone who's leading an effort to revise tenure policies for the department wants to work social media outreach into the process. That's terrific. To win over the Luddites, I need metrics. All right, that's fair. What would you suggest besides just followers and impacts, and are there other things you think would or should be part of that evaluation process? Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah, so I would love to have a formalized way to formalize this. I think the impressions is important, getting really deep into the metrics. I think that it doesn't, I'd have to think about how to make this a more formal thing, but it doesn't hurt to look at other folks in the field, like well-known people in the field, and by well-known, I mean in whatever way you want to take that, who are on social media, who have a presence, and kind of to see what they're doing. And then you can maybe use that, maybe informally, but as oh, see what so-and-so's doing, or see what this other department is doing, or what this other institution or university is doing. Don't make it the crux of your argument, but folks are going to respond to other people doing this successfully or other institutions, so it might help to like bolster your argument.
Yeah, everyone likes a precedent.
Yes.
Another question we have, really, really good. These are really great questions. Do you have any recommendations or thoughts on how to do science communication during the time that is really focused on racial equity in STEM? Really good question. One part that I would say is to make sure that that's incorporated in the kind of science communication that you do and the people whose voices you're trying to amplify. So if you already have a platform and you can share more from people who are either Black scientists or from other underrepresented groups in science who are doing great SciComm, take that opportunity. Can you talk about inclusive SciComm? Because that's a whole area that people are really interested in being involved with. And I'd say, yes, this is especially a moment, a really dramatic kind of like peak in the awareness that we're seeing on social media with a wider audience about this. But like also, this should be something to keep in mind and to incorporate in SciComm all the time, right? That's the only way we're going to actually see some changes moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, I was just saying we wrestle with this a lot because as you can see, Libby and I are both white people, but we do what we're continuing to do what we've always been doing because we don't want to stop doing that. But we have this and component that we try to have all the time. We want to make sure we're amplifying voices, but we're being, and I would say at least personally, being more diligent and deliberate about that. And yeah, just trying to increase these opportunities because we do have a platform. The Sharing Science platform is really great, and we want to use that not only for just kind of what we're doing, what we think that like the general kind of SciComm stuff, but it's not just about putting out tips for jargon. It's about so much more than that. So we've been trying to use our platform the best we can, and that's kind of our best advice for everyone else.
I think with that, there's so many other great questions, but we don't want to take it much past the hour. Probably all of you have other meetings that you're supposed to be in right now. But we will try to address more of these when we send that follow-up email. And this webinar will also be archived, so if you missed any part of it or want to send it to anyone else or refer back to it later, you'll be able to. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, we'll be in touch soon, and we hope to see you at a webinar in the future. All right,
Thanks.
bye everyone.